Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Clockedin with me, your host, Jordan Edwards. I'm thrilled to have you tune in as we dive into the dynamic world of productivity, success, and stories of incredible individuals who've mastered the art of getting things done. Whether you're commuting, hitting the gym, or just relaxing at home, this podcast is the go-to source for inspiration and actionable tips to level up your productivity game. I'm on a mission to unravel the secrets of those who seem to effortlessly manage their time and achieve their goals. So if you're ready to clock in and unlock your full potential, you're in the right place. We've got a lineup of amazing guests, industry experts, and thought leaders who will share their insights and strategies to help us crush your to-do list and make the most out of every moment. Get ready to get inspired, motivated, and equipped with the tools you need to supercharge your productivity. This is Clocked In with Jordan Edwards. Let's dive in. Hey, what's going on, guys? We got a special guest here today. We have Laura Nguyen. She's an ex-corporate executive turned entrepreneur and coach. She's a speaker and also an author of the Career Break Compass coming out this November. Now, Laura, what is a career break and why are these things important? I thought we're supposed to work every day of our life. What are you talking about break? What is this break? Tell us what's going on here. Great to have you.
Jordan. First off, thanks for having me on the show. Really appreciate it. So let's talk a little bit about a career break. So, when I think about a career break, it's essentially an extended amount of time away from work. Now, a career break can be by choice or potentially by circumstance. And when I say circumstance, it's typically a layoff or a termination of some sort, right? So sometimes we don't get to choose when a career break happens to us. And career breaks can happen for many reasons. Like I think typically we think of career breaks for, let's say, moms who decide that they're going to take some time for their family, people who are taking caregiving career breaks, potentially to care for an aging parent, or people who take a sabbatical, right? So there's also sabbaticals that people can take, whether that's, a part of the organization they work for or a sabbatical they take for themselves to spend a year and travel around the world or whatever that might look like. So career breaks can happen for many different reasons and take many different shapes and forms. And your question on the second question of why is it important? When I think about the way that we work and live today, there's such a dramatic change, I think, over the last 4 years and even generationally, that we want to have more of a life and enjoy life, as well as having an impact in our work. And so I think career breaks have become significantly more common for that reason. I think there was a LinkedIn report that came out that said 62% of employees have taken a career break, which I thought was, for me, such a surprising number because we never talk about it. Like, we don't really talk about when we take a career break or have, let's say, a resume gap. We just kind of glaze over it. And I feel like that's like the most important story.
Absolutely. And I mean, when you really think about it, it's kind of funny because a career break, in essence, most people would consider that, oh, I was laid off for 9 months. Laid off for 9 months versus, hey, I had a career break and I traveled around and got to know myself a lot better and started this new hobby. Much more like they're both the same thing. So the point of this that I'm trying to get for the audience to realize is that no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, the flexibility we have to redesign our entire life is drastic. Like I was talking to my parents about it. Like I was like, why didn't you travel more when you were younger? And they're like, Jordan, there wasn't phones. This whole concept of just hopping on a plane and going is so like your generation. And I'm like, why is that? And he's like, airplane prices are normal. They're not insane. He's like, when I was going through this, no access, didn't really know. And now there's so much more affordability and you could stay connected and do all these things. And I was even on with a buddy and we were talking about how AT&T is a plan, $100 a month, keep your same phone. Just do your thing. Nothing changes. It's incredible.
Yeah. The accessibility to your point is like such a good thing and a bad thing, right? I think that's the reason why like some of us are desiring breaks in such a way is because we're so highly connected now that, maybe our parents' generation didn't have the constant pings on their phone, from Slack or Teams and then all the emails, right? And so that becomes different because the truth is like the cognitive load and the emotional load of hearing, or feeling your Apple Watch buzz throughout the entire day is so anxiety inducing. Like there's a book that's called Micro Stresses, and that's basically what
Yeah.
it's about, which is like all of these accumulate, right? Like they all add up, and then it creates this really stressful event for someone over the course of time that it becomes chronic. And then ultimately, sometimes what that leads to is burnout for a lot of people because they can never really check out, or they don't feel like they're being challenged in their work, like it's the constant like monotony of the work. And so that becomes a huge issue as well for people.
Absolutely. And it usually is like a one-sided, hey, it's way too easy or it's way too hard. And something might go from way too hard, and then you do it for a few months and it becomes too easy. And it's this challenge where you're in the middle. So where do you find most people hit burnout? Is there a certain age? Is it a certain time in life, or is it just anywhere and anywhere? Because I don't know. It's just a very interesting concept because, like we talked about before, it wasn't that relevant before. Like before, it was like ignore your feelings, get back to work, you have family, do your thing.
Yeah, and I think, there's a couple of things to just kind of like unpack in that too, right? Which is the conversation around, is burnout more prevalent today than it was before, or are we just talking about it in a different way because we've had such a shift in our societal awareness around mental health and self-care and prioritizing our well-being, right? Which I think are all good things we need to talk about. Like stuffing it down has never helped anyone. And so, I think like WHO, the World Health Organization, came out and said that 77% of employees actually experience burnout today in their current jobs. Now,
Wow.
so if you start looking at that, and you start looking at like demographically what that looks like. I've talked, student burnout is a huge thing. I think student health, like student mental health, has been a major challenge for academia and those in academics for quite a long time, and trying to address, how students are dealing with the chronic stress within college. And then the next component goes, when you look at Gen Z and what are they experiencing around burnout, there's actually a higher, if you look at the kind of the demographic breakdowns, really it's a Gen Z and millennial populations that are experiencing burnout at higher levels. Now, is that because they're actually experiencing it at higher levels, or is it because they're willing to talk about it? That's two different
And
things, right?
and maybe, yeah, absolutely. Or is it just an affordable way? The like in high school, you could probably pull like, hey, I need a mental health day. Everyone would be like, what are you talking about? I don't even know what that means. And like you still get some people who are like, what are you saying? Like, what does that even mean? And it's not that one's good or bad, but it's just there's two different mindsets, and it's like, how do we handle these things? And like for me, I've always thought the career break was a very intentional, strategic one because for me, I found it super interesting. Because if you're strategic around it, it's like if you're a good employee, you might get laid off, you might not get laid off. But if you're strategic about it, it's like, whoa, we could like you could really change the perspective and see how you enjoy these things and kind of play with variables instead of the conventional, hey, I never leave 20 miles from my home and I don't have a passport.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, and that really was why I wrote the book, right? So for me, when I was planning my own career break, I had interviewed other people I knew who had taken at the time sabbaticals. Like that was the word I was using, was a
Yeah.
sabbatical. And technically a sabbatical is if you take a break and you go back to your organization. And I was like, well, that's not necessarily the case because some people might not go back. So
Yeah.
for me, I just describe it more as a career break. And as I was doing the research, one of the key things that I recognized was most people don't have a plan when they go into a career break. And
Yeah.
right. And so then the next piece becomes then they're in their break and they're really struggling because all of a sudden, all of the
Yeah.
structure that you had in your life, your full calendar, and typically probably what you defined yourself as, which is your work and what you do for a living, are
Massive,
gone.
massive.
Right. And so then it starts to have this like major heaviness on you of what's my identity and what value am I going to have in this world? And who do I connect with? Because all my friends are working right now. So I feel really alone. So it sends them in kind of a bad spot. And so that's the key is helping, my goal in writing the book was to give you a framework that you could use during your break to kind of reset, right? To intentionally reset, recharge, and then think about how you want to live your life because you can have this moment of time that is such a beautiful amount of time where, to your point, you can intentionally think about your life. So I always talk about like an intentional break for an intentional life because
Yeah.
this is your gift that you can give to yourself.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that point you brought up about the identity is something I've battled with for so long because with the entire consulting model, it was always this idea of like people would always think if I got a promotion, I had an incredible year. And I go, partly true, partly not true. That's one day. You still have the other 364 days you have to be happy or somewhat feelings of stuff. So my point always was you have to be there mentally. You have to figure out what you like. And whenever I talk to my mentor, he's always like, figuring out you is the biggest project. Project you is the biggest thing. And you have to figure out your needs and what you want to accomplish. Because, like you're saying, I've spoken to people who took a career break and they're like, yeah, I'm going to write a book. And they only got 3 paragraphs in. I'm like, you didn't finish the novel? No, I didn't have the habit. I didn't have anyone holding me accountable. Obvious. Like, you know what I mean? We do these things where we think things are just going to happen because now there's the time. No, there's always been the time. You just never prioritize it.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, so, so true. And that's the time, without the break too. I mean, here's the
Yes.
truth, right? Is that I think you and I have talked about this like, pre us recording, which is, of the folks that engage with me to help them plan their career break, the majority of them, once you start to put in the practices today, recognize that you don't need to take the break because you've now prioritized the things that are most important to you. So, for example, if you're prioritizing, you know, let's say growth and education, right? Like we're you're being accountable by connecting on a weekly basis and we're saying these are the things you're going to do. How are you progressing toward that? If you want to spend more time with your family and intentionally connect with them in a different way to say allow you to travel with them, then we say, okay, well, what trips have you planned with your parents, or with your family and kids for this quarter? And what does that look like? Or if you want to put in a practice for meditation and mindfulness and journaling, or even just planning for your business, then we sit down and we say, when's the last time you did that? Right? Like what we start doing is we go, let's put action to your priorities and make sure that your plans have prioritization as a part of that as well. And so I think that's the key is if you can include these practices today, right, into your
Yes.
routine, you can still achieve great things and not burn out in the process.
100%. And I think, like, I realized this my senior year of college. One of the biggest things for me was how do you intentionally have the best month ever or the best year ever? And when you start asking yourself these tough questions, what ends up happening is you really open the door to, wait, what would intentional look like? One, slash, what would I want to accomplish? Because some people, like you said, are very want to be close with their family, right? And it's like, well, how often do you see your family? And they're like, once every 2 weeks. Okay, cool. Now let's actually look how often you see your family. And it might be once a month, it might be once every 3 months because you get busy, stuff happens. But if you're intentional and you plan stuff out, you can create an incredible life. And I just wanted to harp on that comment because, like, with the audience, so they understand that this isn't really about career breaks. It's more about how do you create a life that you don't want to run away from? And how do you create something that you're really passionate about, which I think is
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, I love that. And I think your question right around like, how do I have the best month? We have to start to define like, what does best mean to you? Because I think so often we go, I want to be successful, right? Or I want to be happy. And my next question was, well, what does that look like? What are the ingredients of that? Like, how do
Yes.
you define that? Because how you define that, Jordan, might be really different from how I define it. And also, how I might define it today might look really different from how I might define it 3 months from now.
100%. And there's so many people that do the default correlation, which success, happiness, more money. So if I make more money, I'm more happy. And it's like there's a point where that works. And I do agree, money brings resources, money allows you to do a lot of things. However, if you sacrifice going to the gym, if you sacrifice seeing your friends and family, if you sacrifice all the weddings and everything, is the money really worth it? And it's like, it's not give or take. There's always just barriers of like the parameters, right? So like you could do 10% work, 10% working out. Like it's not, I can only do this and I can't do this. There's so many scales that we can do. And I just wanted to make sure everyone realized that. So Laura, for you, tell us when do people kind of see themselves going into burnout? Where does burnout really occur? Like what's the path of burnout?
Yeah. So there's a few stages to burnout that I typically talk about, right? Which is, typically you start off, and I think about it like you're going on a road trip and you're really excited when you first start the road trip. You've got your snacks, you've got your road trip music, and you're ready to go. And then, all of a sudden, you're driving down the highway, you're maybe like an hour and a half, 2 hours in, and you start to just get a little tired. And, you notice that there's some dark clouds in the distance and you're getting a little stressed. You're like, ooh, that looks like there might be kind of a bad storm ready to hit, which is kind of the onset of stress. The next stage goes into where you actually are feeling more of that stress, right? And so now you're feeling the stress because the rain is pouring down and your rain is just like, it's blocking your windshields, your wipers are going crazy, and you're having a really hard time having visibility. So you're white knuckling it a little bit, trying to make sure that you're continuing to stay within the lanes. So that's when you start to feel that anxiety really sit with you, right? You're feeling it in your body. You're feeling your heart rate increase. You're feeling that pit in your stomach. And that's what that shift looks like. Your body starts to give you signs and signals. And then you hit burnout, which is essentially when your car has the, check engine light turn on and it says, hey, something's not right here. Something's wrong with the car. It's pouring rain. You can't see out the windshield and you start to feel depleted and debilitated, right? Like you don't know what to do. So the question becomes, do you get off the highway and you pull off on the side of the road or do you keep driving? That's the first question you have to ask yourself.
Yeah.
Let's say you decide that you're going to pull off and try to figure out where to go from there. And so in that situation, you're looking to try to recover and identify what to do next. For others who stay on the road, we actually start to move into chronic burnout, where you're getting into a habitual burnout cycle to where you are ignoring your check engine light and you're just going to keep powering through until that car is dead on the side of the highway, right? And so that becomes the issue is that are we looking at the signals and the symptoms and are we doing the things we need to before it gets too bad?
Yeah, and it's the habits, it's all the habits we're building. So we're constantly going through this. And I had a buddy tell me he works in an office of probably 50 guys, and he said literally a guy had a heart attack and died on the floor. And I'm like, and he's like, this guy for 25 years never left, never went on vacation, never did anything. He's like, in that moment, I just he's like, dude, I booked a vacation right there. And it's this realization that I want this podcast to be kind of the wake up moment for whoever's listening, that it doesn't have to be a crazy death. It doesn't have to be a crazy, oh my God, I've gone off the rails moment. It could be, hey, I'm taking inventory of myself and I'm not loving the inventory. And maybe we can make a change here.
Yeah, that breaks my heart because it's just, I think a lot of the times, I was just actually listening to a podcast and I forget his first name, but it's Hollis is his last name. And one of the things he wrote a book actually on kind of the isolation and the impact of, you know, of really stress in society for men specifically, and how,
100%.
the feeling of like having everything kind of ripped away from you and not having a network of friends to talk to about the real issues in your life because what ends up happening is you're talking about sports or politics, which are things that are outside of you, right? And so that's what he talks about in these books. And I think the research that he's done really kind of highlights that we need more community and we need to
Yes.
be able to take care of ourselves, right? And that's how we build better lives, is that like how we measure the second half of life is more important than living by the structures and the systems and the expectations that society likely put on us.
100%. And that's literally why I have the coaching groups, because you start to realize that men's biggest issues are being alone, desperate, or they feel stuck.
Mhm.
Like by desperate, I mean like they have depression or anxiety or whatever, and then they feel stuck. Those are the big three. And because of that, you start to realize that people are in different situations. And it's interesting because no one knows the definitions of all these things. Like, what does alone mean? Does alone mean that you talk to no one and do nothing? Or does alone mean that it's Friday night and no one hit you up? Like, there's so many definitions for all these things. So, like, once you define them, then you can kind of break through them. But you're absolutely right. Community and even just having one person on your team moves the needle for you. Like, how's the transition for you as you were in corporate and now you're doing this entrepreneurial thing? Like, what's the difference there?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is a difference and it isn't, right? Because, I had internally within an organization, you have your team, you've got your peers, and then you have, your senior people who are more senior than you. So you have kind of the structure of where you typically fit in, organizationally, where you fit in, right? So there's this component of it. And I think the difference for me now is I think about the difference between authenticity and belonging a lot of just like the two kind of the two things that sometimes compete against each other in my mind. And like you can be in an organization and pseudo belong, right? Like you can achieve the goals, you can do those things. You have your team that, report to you, but that kind of like is a pseudo sense of belonging in some way. I think on this side of the house, what I've recognized is that I was really scared to shift and not have a team anymore. I've been managing people for, you know, over a dozen years. And I love managing and helping people grow. It's my favorite thing, which is the reason why I added coaching as a pillar to my business. But consulting side of the house is you work with teams, but you're on the outside. There isn't a sense of belonging in a lot of ways because you're not really within them, but you're trying to help them, right? And so that's always a different component. And so for me, what I think about is on the consulting side, I've got my team of people that I work with, meaning, like my network of other contractors and the people who help me grow my business. And then I also have the teams that I work with that are my client teams. And so it's the navigation, Jordan, kind of between all of those areas, but recognizing that as you're shifting, let's say from corporate to entrepreneurship, you still have to have people around you. Like, I think there's a lot of talk around solopreneurship. And sure, I think that sounds great, right? But in reality, we need people. Like, we need people to bounce ideas around, to network with, to help us grow, to support us in different ways. And so I talk about it in the book and I talk about it, in my day-to-day life, which is like, who are the people around you that are supporting you, whether that's giving you new ideas or helping to fuel you in different ways. And that's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really the biggest difference, I think, is really that inside of the entrepreneurship and inside of the consulting, you get to choose those people instead of it. Sometimes in the
Mm,
corporate
mhm.
landscape, it's chosen for you. In which case, like you're like, I like this person, I might not like this person. It's above my decision. It's not my call. But in the entrepreneur one, it's kind of like, hey, you pick the client, you pick the coworker, you pick the people. So it's the cool thing about it, like you create your own frame of reference and whatever that is. So for you, if someone's in burnout, how do they get out of it? What's the path out of there?
Yeah. So if you're in burnout, I think there's a few things that we talk about. There's a ton of research and books around just, how do you prevent yourself from being in burnout? And I think what I've recognized is that when you're deep in burnout, those seven things are still really important and really key. But I try to break it down into thinking about it as like three things. And especially for high achievers, especially for entrepreneurs, like we move to action. We want to see results, right? And so the challenge is that when you're in burnout, you're feeling stuck. And there's a sense of learned helplessness or loss of hope in that model. So what we need to do is to shift you out of that. So like
Yeah.
I talk about it as like a 3P framework. Like we need to make sure that you infuse play. We need to make sure that you're pausing. And then we need to make sure that you're planning intentionally. And so we start with play and the importance of play because as adults, for some reason, we forget to play. We like throw it out the window. And the things that bring us joy, somehow we like to punish ourselves and not do them. So,
So
like, you got to figure out how you play.
yeah, yeah, I just wanted to hop in there because I forgot who told me it, but it was basically that a child, their default is happiness. So they're always happy. And then when they get unhappy, they start like screaming and running around. And that's when they get upset. But an adult, our default is unhappiness. But when we do the activity, then we get happy. So what Laura's saying here is like, do the activity, like whether that's hopping on a podcast, whether that's listening to a podcast, whether that's going for a drive in your cool car, whether that's going on a run, whatever it is, like do the activity that makes you feel like play because that's what will give you the joy. 100%.
Yes. Yeah, so true. And I think that's, when you think about children, like in child development, so much of why they learn so quickly and so rapidly, right, is through play. Like they learn how to collaborate with other people, they learn how to problem solve, they learn how to be in flow, right, which is all of these like areas for us to maximize our creativity and what helps you tick. And so if we as adults need to be problem solvers and be creative and collaborate with other human beings, then why wouldn't play also be a part of that recipe, right? And so like figure out what are the things that you really love to do. I always say like make a list of 10 things of things that you have loved to do in the past that you haven't had the chance to do most recently, or things that you've always wished that you could do and you just haven't done them yet. And then in the next column, I want you to add a date next to when you're going to do those things. And so we basically go, here's your idea, and let's schedule it and get it done so that you are committing to that activity. So we start with play. The next area is around pause. And pause is sometimes the hardest part for people because that's when you're sitting still and you're being mindful and you're being reflective about, what are the areas that are most important to you in your life? What are the things that you want to, let's say, achieve in this lifetime? And the question then becomes, why do you want to achieve those things? Is it because of a construct of an outward society? Like, is it for your ego or is it for something different? So we have to explore some of those tangible things. And then the next piece, kind of the last P that I think about there is plan. And so when you're in plan, what ends up happening is, you're being more thoughtful about what is what are the career areas that you want to excel in? What are the life areas that you want to excel in? How do you want to create the life that you're living? And I always kind of go, I do my 3 Ps plus one, which is once you figure that out, you have to go pursue it. Like you have to
Yeah.
go do it. We can't just sit and dream. Like we have to go do something about it. So like go experiment and see what that looks like and what gets you excited.
Absolutely. And the planning one I really enjoy because there's so many times that we're just someone gave me an example of like you're in the woods and you're walking in the woods, and then there's a time where you lift your head and you're above the woods. So you can see past all the trees, you can see in all directions instead of just focusing on your one step at a time, which is good. You need to do that. But if you don't take inventory of like, wait a second, I've been doing this for 10 years and I don't even like this. What am I doing? Like, what's the intention here? And you start to ask these better questions. You start to learn more instead of making brash decisions. Like there's so many times where I talk to people and they're like, I'm gonna quit my job. And I'm like, why? And they're like, because I want to start this business. And I go, great. What's the business? And they'll tell me something and I'm like, how much money are you bringing in from that? And they're like, well, like I haven't started yet. And I'm like, okay, come back in a week and just start. And then they'll come back a week later and go, yeah, I'm not doing that. That was a bad idea. And I'm like, see, like it's not always that one's good or bad, but it's just figure out the action and then work on the action. You've never been in a world where we had so much accessibility and so much freedom. And it's like try your best and just try to capitalize on that. I think it's so important for us.
I agree. I think the biggest one is I like to think of things as an experiment. It's partly like the marketer in me is like everything is an experiment, right? And so just because let's say you try something and it doesn't work, it doesn't mean that it's wrong or you're failing or that you're stuck. It just means that thing didn't work. But what can you learn from it and do something else? Like it's just pivot, constantly pivot, learn, experiment.
100%. And if people are saying no to you, it might be the wrong idea, but it also might not be the right people. And that was something super
Mhm.
important that I realized the other day that like there's so, like if you give a big idea to a small mind, it's a small idea. Like it
Mhm.
doesn't land. So it's just really important for anyone who's going out there and trying to pursue these things and you start facing rejection. It's like, hey, maybe it's not the right caliber of people, which
Yeah,
does make
I
a
love that.
difference.
Yeah, you're
So
right. You're right.
absolutely. So for you, Laura, how do we do a path to success? How do we get ourselves out of there? We've kind of created ourselves out of burnout, but how do we start like winning? Like I want to win. I don't want to be in this negative zone anymore. I want to be in the winning zone. What do I need to do?
Yeah, I think there's really I root myself in like two things. The first one is what are your core values? Like if you can sit down, identify what your three core values are. I've got an exercise. I think I have it on my site. You can go to it and you basically circle these keywords that just resonate with you. And then you explore from there, what are the definitions of those words? Do they truly drive with who you are? And then you take those and you narrow it down to like, what are the themes that come from there? And what are the 3 to 5 core values that you have? No more than that. And then from there, you would now have like a directional compass of like, how do you want to live your life? Because if a decision comes up and it doesn't align with your, let's say, 4 core values, then give yourself permission to say no to it and let it go, right? Because if you're rooted in core values, it's easier to set boundaries. It's easier to make decisions because you're grounded in yourself. And then the second is we got to get clear on what you're good at. And a lot of people have a challenging time with confidence, right? It's something we all struggle with. And this is why the conversation around imposter syndrome comes up so often, is that actually what it is it's a crisis of confidence. And so what we need to do is get you back to what are the things that you're really good at? And so I always have people go through an exercise where they look at, let's say, their past roles, and we reflect on, what are projects where you won at those roles? How did you feel during that time? What did you bring to the table? And what excites you about, that specific project that then you can take into the future for you? And so we do that because it gives you an opportunity to really reflect on how you show up. And when you show up, you win.
Yes, absolutely. And I would even add on to that where you were saying that what past projects have you done? It's also what things have you done in your life that you enjoy? Like I
Yes.
had this guy, Frank Fumi, on, and he organized a softball league and he like really enjoyed that. So then he created this thing called I9 Sports. There's been, I think, over 1 million members, and it's just insane
I love
where they
that.
have so many different sports teams. And it's like, who would have thought that that would have been a profitable business? But he just committed to it. He stayed with it. And it's just important for us to realize that, like, hey, maybe you really enjoy analyzing movies. Maybe you really enjoy running marathons, whatever it is, dive deeper into that. And then you can learn from that and you'll find something along the way. Like there's never been an easier time in this world where you could kind of go after what you enjoy, which is, I think, is a really empowering thing for us.
Yeah, I love that. It's so true, right? Like that exploration of how do I continue to just explore what makes me excited to wake up every morning and be able to do that. Now, let's get real. Like every job has its downside, right? Like every decision we make also has a downside. We're saying no to something else. We just have to be aware of that.
100%. Like you, and I'm just giving examples just so the audience can sit there and start to think a little bit differently. But I was with a buddy of mine last weekend, and he was explaining to me that he lives in Salt Lake City and he works for a big company, and he is legitimately going, he's like, dude, I have every Wednesday the rest of the year off. I go, wow. But you sit there and really think about it. You're like, okay, well, I guess it's 3 months. So that's maybe like 15 days. Okay. So you could take a 2 week vacation. I'm like, what are you going to do every Wednesday? And he's like, I'm going to ski. He's like, I'm going to ski every single Wednesday. And I'm like, how incredible is that? Because you completely disassociate, I'm a bad employee for taking off, and you completely disassociate, I can have fun, but you just mush them together and you're like, no, this is what I'm doing. These days don't roll over. I'm gonna enjoy my time. And he's protecting himself from that burnout mentality by being able to just take that middle day off. And it's like once it's scheduled and it's put in, it's like you can be so strategic with your life, but half of us don't take the time to think about it. So I want this podcast to be the wake up call to like, hey, start thinking a little bit differently. And if you want to talk to me or Laura, like you should, because it will get you thinking differently in what perspectives and what's possible.
Yeah, it's about being creative, right? I think so many people think it's a binary choice. Either I'm
Yes.
gonna like hustle and grind, or I'm just gonna like kick back and like coast. And
Yeah.
it's not binary. It's not binary. Like to your point around your friend who's integrated his work and his life together, so he's enjoying aspects. Like he's taken he's got 7 days in a week. And he said, I'm going to take Wednesday for sure. I'm going to go skiing. Like he's committed and given himself permission to do that. Not enough people are giving themselves permission to do what makes them happy. And that is what ends up causing us all of this stress. It's what ends up making us miserable. This is why adults walk around unhappy, to your point, because we're not making decisions that make us happy, but we can. No one is stopping us. We are
Yeah.
stopping ourselves.
Yeah, 100%. So, Laura, for you, what's one of the most creative things that you've seen that maybe you experienced, or maybe a client has experienced, or something that you're like, wow, that's like, I didn't even realize what was going on there, but makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So a couple things. So I have a friend that actually she's in healthcare. And so what she ends up doing is that, because of her schedule, and she's worked it out with her hospital to where she'll work 4 months, right? And then she'll take a month off. And she'll work 4 months and take a month off. And that's just kind of like how she has structured her life. And I think that's worked really well for her because what it does is it says, I'm going to have this time of sprinting and then I'm going to have a time of rest. And I thought that was first off, like when I was working, like in my mind, I'm like, how is that even possible? Like, how can you just take a month off? Like, how does that even work? But it does work in her staffing model. So every organization is a little bit different. And so that has worked in her staffing model. So I think that's one component. The other one that, I think we often forget is I have a client who she was really burnt out and really struggling in her role, and she didn't know what to do. And so, for her, she went to her boss and said, I just I need to take a month off. I need to take 4 weeks off for my own health and be able to rest and recharge. And and she said the worst thing they're going to say is no, but I have to ask for it because I don't know what else to do. My next choice is to resign. And they said yes. And she took the time, she rested. Honestly, she just rested during the time. Like it wasn't even about going somewhere. She wasn't traveling. She was just honestly giving herself time to decompress. And she went back and she was ready to go and be re-engaged again. And so the lesson there that I really learned that I always like to share is just ask, because the worst that someone can tell you is no. But if you're not advocating for yourself, then nothing can change.
100%. I completely agree. And one of the most creative ones I experienced was my fiance and I, we traveled for 7 weeks, and she was actually got approval, went with her company and worked. We worked in Europe. So back to your, I wake up and I start hearing pings. We were up European time at 8 a.m., which is 2 a.m. East Coast, United States, which means we didn't hear from
Mhm.
anyone until 2 p.m. that next day. So our whole like 8, 9, 10 o'clock at nighttime, we just plopped in the morning. So we would get a little bit less sleep, maybe go to bed at like 12 or 1, and then we'd get up at 8 a.m. and just start our day and go explore and have incredible mornings. And then we should work 2 to 10. And it was incredible because it was like once you start playing with the time zones, a lot of things open up, which is just an amazing thing that we couldn't do beforehand. And she literally made more money in that time than she did if she was at home. Because it just, you're so focused on it, but only for those hours. And then you drop it off and you move on. And it's not a big deal. Because we always try to make
Yeah.
everything the biggest deal in the world, and it's just not. Um, and I
Hmm.
just think that's
Hmm.
so important for people to realize that,
Yeah.
like you just said, like I mean, unless you're doing heart surgery, but then heart surgery, like those are only the assigned ones that you have to do the surgery for. Like heart surgeons can still take off time too. Like anybody can do this. And it's really important because like everyone thinks that they're not replaced. Everybody's replaceable. And like you can use that aspect to your benefit if you want to try it that way. And it doesn't make anybody look weak. It doesn't make anyone look like not a hard worker. It's just like, hey, like need a minute. Cool.
Yeah. I have a friend actually who his kids they graduated from college, and so they're officially empty nesters, and so they sold everything. They sold their house, they sold their car, they sold everything, and they're spending the next year in South America, and so they're
So
gonna like bounce around to different countries and just explore, and they're working the entire time because it's in the Eastern time zone. It's your point around time zones, right? And so you can still work your normal time, but then now you're getting to explore a new country in a different way. And I'm so excited for him and his wife. I'm like thrilled and also jealous because I have a small kiddo and that's a little harder for us to do right now. But we're planning to do summers elsewhere. So that's our big thing is like, how do we summer elsewhere where we have more, an extended amount of time to take off that we can go explore and be somewhere else. And for those of you who are explorers, like that might resonate. But it doesn't mean that you have to travel. There's other things that you can do, whether that's like your friend who is skiing or, if you're going to go on retreats. Like I know a lot of people will go on retreats, like it's a weekend retreat. And you can still recharge and do things that fuel you in different ways. You just have to find out what works for you.
Absolutely. And even the thought of having a kid, like what you could even do with a child is if you just relocate your housing, even if it's 30 minutes down the road for 2 weeks, you'll see everything differently. And
Hmm.
that's what I did in the United States in 2020. I was traveling around for 8 months and we would just live in different areas for a month just to see what we liked. And you just start to realize that like the finite amount of time, like when you're in a place that you're very comfortable in, your time runs endlessly. But when you're in a
Hmm.
place and you're on vacation and it's the last couple days, you're like, I gotta make the most of this. It's because there's a finite amount of time. And when you're traveling for a long period of time, you have that finiteness. Instead of like, hey, I'm gonna sit on the couch and watch TV, it's gonna be like, hey, like maybe we should go check out the Country Music Hall of Fame, or like maybe we should go to Red Rocks, or maybe we should go do this thing. When usually you just be like, I'm just gonna sit at home and chill. Because you don't really need to sit at home and chill. You just need to change the pace and start looking for different things.
Hmm. Hmm. That
Even
exploration
before.
is so important, right? Because you get set into your routine, and sometimes that routine, like routines are good and powerful, and I'm big fans of them. But also sometimes we got to like shake our routine a little bit and add a component that has some spontaneity. To your point around like, let's go explore something because we're gonna, this isn't gonna be there next week because we're not gonna be in this city. So if we have that mentality of our lives, right, and recognize that, hey, we all have a finite amount of time on this planet. Like, what are we going to do to
Yeah,
make it worthwhile?
yeah, exactly. And another exploration that I was just thinking about because you brought up the point of like, hey, it doesn't have to be travel. I just joined a new gym. And the first time we went to the
Yeah.
gym, whoa, what's that machine? How's that work? There's still new things and you get excited about it and you're like, what do I do with that thing? And it's just like there's exploration in just joining different groups or doing different stuff or going to a new activity or trying some new hobby. Those are all explorations in its own. It's a lot of the time we're scared to be beginners again. And the
Hmm.
truth is that we have to just go for it because every time you're a beginner, that's when exponential learning really occurs. So it's so
Hmm.
important for us to realize this.
Yep. Agreed. That curiosity is key.
Absolutely. So Laura, we're heading towards the end. Is there anything you want to leave people with in regard to tips for burnout, anything they can do? And then we'll obviously talk about the book and see where people can learn about that a little bit more as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, if you're experiencing burnout, know that you're not alone. I think that's the biggest thing is most people who are undergoing burnout, they aren't talking about it. And so they feel really alone and it becomes really debilitating. And so recognize that you're not alone. Reach out to me or Jordan. We've got communities to help you so that way you're not feeling alone, but we have a chance for you to come together and share stories and share just even resources and tips that work for other people. I found that has been, for me, the most rewarding experience is bringing people together and allowing them to talk about their experiences and giving them a safe container to do that is so, so important. So I would say, the most important thing you can do is reach out, get the help that you need. You've got tons of support systems around you, and we're here and ready to help.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And where can people learn more about you and the book and everything else going on?
Yeah, yeah. So you can find me on my website. It's lauranguyen.co. And so maybe we can drop that in the show notes. It's nguyen.co, not .com, .co. And you can find all my information there. I've got an online community for folks who are going through burnout. The book information is there. I am running a pre-sale exclusive right now. So there's actually a wonderful, she's an Asian adoptee and woman-owned bookstore here in Des Moines that I've partnered with. And so anyone who orders the book from, it's called Reading in Public is the name of the store in Des Moines, Iowa. If you order the book from her, you'll get a signed copy. You'll get entered into a sweepstakes for free coaching hours, and you'll get all of the free bonuses that you'll get as well. If you can't get it through her, you can also get it on Amazon and anywhere books are sold. Just let me know you pre-order the book and I'll get you all the bonus materials. But you'll just have to wait until November 11th or November 12th for the book to arrive at your door.
Awesome. Awesome. I really appreciate the time, Laura, and this has been fantastic.
I I thoroughly appreciate you taking the time as well. This is such a fun conversation. I've just adore being able to chat with you, Jordan. So thanks for having me here.
Absolutely. Thank you for reaching the end of the podcast. For that, we'll give you a complimentary coaching session in the link below with Edwards Consulting. Hope to see you there and have a great day and keep clocking in.